A pleasant good night to everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all here this afternoon, and thank you for joining us. We'd like to welcome our head table, Dr. Doug Burkhardt, who is a psychiatric consultant, Mr. Josh Hector, Director of Mental Health, Dr. Sumitra and Jasmine Kala from the Indian Law Society, pastors and other members of faith-based organizations, P.S. Naomi Jeremiah, members of the mental health staff, and other ministries, members of the surrounding communities, Mikey Live and our virtual viewers, and other media outlets. Before we proceed, I'd like to apologize for the absence of our minister. She had a previous engagement, however, she sends her best regards and encourages us all to make a joint conscious effort to help change the narrative. Before we proceed, we'd like to ask Dr. Doris to lead us in opening prayer.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight, let's place ourselves in the presence of the Lord by standing. Father, Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for this opportunity to come and sit here to discuss a major issue and problem that faces our nation and the world. We pray, Lord, that you'd inspire us, that you'd touch us the way we should be touched, that we, in our own way, would go out and make a difference in the lives of all those who are plagued by suicide, thoughts of suicide, the families who are coping with all of this problem, and we as a society. We pray for enlightenment, we pray for grace, we pray for your guidance and your protection, and that tonight would be a fruitful discussion as we plan our way forward. All of this we ask your Son Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much. Now, this is the second leg of our consultation. This month, September, is being recognized as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month under the theme Hope in Action, From Awareness to Policy Change. And this is more than just a theme, it's a commitment by the ministry to work towards policy changes to ensure that we are able to provide the adequate environment for persons who are dealing with suicide ideations, for survivors, and for family members to get the help needed. Today's session is the second of two. Last week we had a successful consultation at the Presentation Brothers College, and it is our hope that this evening will be just as impactful. Please don't be afraid to let your voices be heard. Ask your questions. If you need clarity, don't be afraid to put up your hand. You'll be given a mic and ask whatever you need to ask. Suicide prevention requires a collective effort, so we cannot do it alone. We need you. Now, to give some brief remarks, I would like to call our PS, Naomi Jeremiah, to the mic.
Thank you very much, Masters of Ceremony. A special good afternoon to our head table, Dr. Burkhardt, and we have also Mr. Josh Hector, our Director of Mental Health and Substance Use, together with our stakeholders, such as our faith-based organizations. We have the staff, the matron of the Mount Psychiatric Ward, some of the doctors at the Mount Hospital, and we also have some of our staff, our nurses, our doctors, the churches who are represented, and of course we have our overseas guests, Dr. Samantha and Ms. Jasmine from Power. We are indeed having a wonderful consultation this afternoon with so many of you out here. And we have our online viewers. I'd like to thank you for viewing in, and I hope that this afternoon session will be very educational. Now, as we can see, we as a ministry, we are very active in terms of moving the agenda for suicide prevention and awareness. Under Team Hope, we are here to bring hope to the people of Grenada. We know definitely that there are many persons out there of various ages who are contemplating suicide. And today we want to use these programs and the policies shift. Our policy shift is to decriminalize suicide on the books, on the law books. So therefore now, if somebody who may try to attempt suicide and they may not have been successful, you can be arrested. But we are reviewing that part of the law to decriminalize this activity. We at the ministry are very concerned with persons who have lost their lives due to suicide. We take this matter very seriously, and we are using the stakeholders, you, the people of our citizens, to come up with plans, actions, policies that can help assist persons. Many persons now, they may have certain anxiety disorders. They may have certain stress in terms of day-to-day activities. You have stresses at work, you have stress in your community, you have stress in your home, and at times, not everyone could cope. I want you to know that we have counselors at the Monge Hospital that could help you. We have also counselors at the Ministry of Mental Health that can help you. We have at the Ministry of Education, Mr. Pearson Stewart and his team from Student Support Unit who can also help you. We have also at the Social Development Ministry, Ms. Kizzy Matthew Clarence. She also is a great counselor. So there is help. And that is a team that we have. We have hope. And with hope, we know that we want to eradicate suicide from our Tri-Island states. I hope I get a round of applause for that. Yes, it seems impossible, but we want to eradicate this practice. We are a Christian nation, and we believe in piggybacking on each other. Where is the love that we had for each other? Where is the neighborly love? Where is the time when we look out for each other as a community? When you have one breadfruit and your neighbor have none, you should share what you have. Not everybody could deal with different situations. You should be your brother's keeper here in Grenada. And I want us to look out for each other. I'm calling on the pastors, the priests, and the clergymen, the bishops. Let us come out and do something for our citizens. There are people there. It's real. And one life lost in Grenada to suicide is one too many. And we need to work together. And I hope this consultation here today will bring us to a point whereby we can see, identify persons, provide hope for them, and I know our expert here has a wealth of knowledge that can be impacted. So thank you, welcome, and I hope we all have an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PS. And as PS said, one life lost to suicide is one too many. So make use of our counselors at Monge and at the Ministry of Health and Education. Remember that there is help available, and we'd like you to make use of it because the aim is to eradicate what? Suicide. To eradicate what? Suicide. Some volume. To eradicate? Suicide. Much better. All right, to set the tone for this afternoon's discussion, we'd like to call our director, Mr. Josh Hector. Let's welcome Mr. Hector.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Is it afternoon or evening, folks? It's night. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. And this month we are not celebrating suicide prevention, we're recognizing it. And this doesn't call for celebration. What we have been doing thus far is hitting the ground with a number of activities to bring about awareness to ensure that this idea of suicide does not hide under the carpet as per usual. And we, as Pia said, we know that every suicide in Grenada is one too many. Even though the global statistics suggest that in the hundreds of thousands die annually by suicide, some may believe that because we are a very small population, this does not concern us. Well, we actually represent a part of that statistic, which is not good. Because as we know, once a person dies by suicide in Grenada, there are ripples, and it is felt across communities. Even the entire nation feels the impact of a single suicide. So we've come out really to keep this mission going. The goal is to eradicate suicide altogether. I believe that given the size of our population, it is possible. Now, we do recognize that realistically, sometimes people may, or some may slip through the crack, and that's a reality that we have to face. But as much as possible, if we can minimize, bring it down to zero, then at least let's have a year where we have no suicides. We had a few this year so far, and we hope that next year we could see no suicides accounted for as we continue to push this initiative forward. Our intention is to keep going even beyond Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And so, both to those who are here with us tonight and to those online, we just want to say thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to your participation in the conversation. Thankfully, we have people who are experts among us, and so tonight we should have a very active session, because we will not just have comments or questions, but we will have contributions from you. So thank you again for being here, and we will begin this consultation quite promptly. Now, you may notice that there's no PowerPoint, there's no projector, because it's not a lecture. Actually, I'm just going to sit and have a chat with Dr. Burkhardt, and coming out of our discussion, we hope that you will have a million questions to ask. Thank you for being here. Good night, Dr. Burkhardt.
Good night again.
So just like we did on last Thursday night, this is really just a conversation, a discussion geared towards doing a number of things. First and foremost, it is important that we debunk a number of the myths about suicide and to let people understand exactly why suicides generally tend to occur. We also want to look at some of the contributors as well as the strategies to avoiding or preventing suicide. So first of all, Dr. Burkhardt, when it comes to suicidal ideation, there is a myth that it is a mental illness. Is this true? And if not, can you talk about suicidal ideation and when it exists, what does this mean?
Suicidal ideas can occur out of many reasons. It can occur as a psychological reaction to something that happens in your life. So we call it psychoreactive, meaning something terrible happened in your life, like loss of somebody who you're very close to, or relationship breaks apart, or natural disaster. This can really be a psychological affecting situation for individuals, and some individuals react in a way that they get very sad, very hopeless, and then can, of course, develop suicidal ideas. So that is actually quite frequent. I think if you really look at ourselves, I would believe that many of us had the idea, well, is it really worth, I want to be dead, something like that, in really bad situations. Think about yourself. But that is not necessarily a situation where you really then attempt to kill yourself. It's just because of the frustration of hopelessness, despair. This can occur. That is very, very frequent. And these reactions, as I just told you, like grief, despair, that are normal psychological reactions to occurrences in our life that are unpleasant, stressful, something like that. So that is not, of course, a mental illness. It's a reaction. But then, of course, we also have suicidal ideas, suicidal attempts in connection with mental illnesses. But I think we are going to focus on that a little later.
Yeah. Even as we think about suicidal thought or ideas in connection with mental illness, does everyone who has these thoughts also have a mental illness?
No, of course not. Mm-hmm. Of course not. I think that's what I said, that it can be a consequence from a normal psychological reaction, and that is then, of course, not a mental illness. It's a different mental condition, maybe, but it's not an illness. So something like that doesn't necessarily require medical treatment, let's say medication, hospitalization, something like that. That can be dealt with, let's say, psychotherapy, with counseling, with talking to individuals one would be would trust. And maybe I should tell you these thoughts. If you think of how the world was like 200, 250, 300 years ago, how did people live? They lived in big families. So there were parents, grandparents, other children, aunts, uncles, whatever, living in one house. And you couldn't really hide anything much. So every problem that occurred was known basically to almost everybody, and people talked about it. Of course, and that's what you already realized at that point in time. Talking about it is already the solution of the problem. The thing is, here, everybody of us has very similar experiences during their lives. Loss of somebody, disasters, breakups. We all have these kind of experiences. And by talking about these experiences, where others are also familiar with, typically the problem will solve, or at least it becomes easier to deal with. And then maybe the suicidal ideas, they just disappear. Now, today, we have a completely different situation. How do we live? In many cases alone, or in very small family aggregations, maybe with children and parents, but grandparents in the same house, already quite rare. In many cases, the family are just scattered over the country, over the world. In my case, for instance, my kids live everywhere. Germany, Los Angeles, everywhere. And again, in small family compounds. Man, wife, a couple of children, that's it. And that means this kind of knowledge about what is going on with other members of your family who are far away, we don't know that. So these kind of interactions are not so likely to occur. And that is really the big business for the psychotherapists, because that's where they come in. You don't have individuals to talk to about these kind of problems, so you have to look for help, and that's psychotherapists. Now, psychotherapy, and we just talked about recently, psychotherapy, to get psychotherapy in Grenada is not so easy. We have about 120,000 Grenadians, approximately, and we have about less than 10, most likely maybe 8 psychotherapists. See where the problem is? So there are quite a lot of problems. One problem is that it is difficult to take the step to look for help in somebody who you don't know. to psychotherapists. So it's a really a big hurdle to look for help and go for help. And then, once you make the decision in Grenada, it's very hard to find somebody who's there and has time. So this is a big deficiency here in Grenada, that the help for individuals with normal psychological reactions because of psychoreactions in their lives have problems, have difficulties to get help. I would talk too long, sorry.
So, Dr. Burkhardt, you were talking about people with mental illnesses as well as people with these normal psychological reactions. Where do you see a greater prevalence of suicidal ideation? From which group?
See, the point is, I mainly deal with individuals with mental illnesses. Having said that, before Dr. Francia, who was a youth and child psychiatrist, came back to Grenada, I had to deal with young people in the general hospital, and there was almost no week where one or two younger individuals in the general hospital were admitted because of suicidal attempts, mainly females actually. So there is quite a number, and that's only the ones who attempted suicide and something happened so that they were hospitalized. So there might be a big group which really doesn't surface, you know. In terms of suicide in suicidal attempts in mental illnesses occurs. Okay, maybe I have to go a little bit into the specifics here. So, as mental illness, the main mental illnesses we are dealing with is depression and schizophrenia. There are others, but that's the main ones we are dealing with in the psychiatric hospital and psychiatric system here in Grenada. And let's start with schizophrenia. In schizophrenia, individuals have a disorder of thought and perception. Okay, so their thinking is not as it should be. Okay, let's call it normal. So their reality, because of that disorder of thought that just happens in the brain, their reality is different from the reality we are experiencing. So they might experience that people are able to influence their thoughts or read their thoughts or something like that. So that causes an enormous stress. They might be hearing voices, that's an order of this perception, might be seeing stuff as reality, which is not real. So that can be very scary for them. Sometimes they hear voices and sometimes they can identify the voice as it is somebody, or it's the devil, or it's God, something like that. And sometimes they hear, kill yourself. And sometimes they would obey. So they would obey because they hear it. Sometimes they kill themselves because they just cannot longer deal with this kind of stress they are experiencing. In terms of depression, we have a situation where people are completely hopeless. And in most cases, well, we have to differentiate it a little bit here, because psychoreactive depressants, which is because of a normal psychological reaction, which becomes pathological because it lasts too long and affects their lives, okay? And the other form of depression is we call it endogenic, that is mainly hereditary determined, to just make it short and easy. And in depression, the main symptom is sadness, hopelessness, inability to motivate oneself to fulfill the expected roles, disorder of sleep. And these symptoms, if somebody experiences that at an extreme level, they also are very likely to become suicidal. But here, we can help with medication. So once the patient comes to the hospital, there's medication, and typically in a couple of weeks, patients are much, much better. So we are dealing with suicidality in lots of our patients, to answer this question, yes.
So, One, two, good. You know, depending on where you work, you may deal with patients, and then in another setting, you would be dealing with clients. And I'm saying this because we would notice that a larger percentage of the population does not have complicated mental illnesses. As a matter of fact, those requiring specialized psychiatric care tend to be a very, very small population. And of course, if you can explain suicidal ideation based on the existence of a mental illness, then you can medicate accordingly and treat accordingly. But when it comes to suicidal ideation that is based on the psychosocial determinants of stress, or the average everyday issue that may have implications for stress levels and anxiety, generally speaking, those people are the larger percentage of the population. So when it comes to the symptoms, though, interestingly, when you described the symptoms of depression, I've noticed that when it comes to suicidal ideation, it presents quite similarly, where people are hopeless, people are demotivated, people may be sleeping a lot or not enough, people may be quite hyperactive or extremely lethargic. But all of this being said, when we look at the symptoms, what are some of the risk factors? Apart from the mental illnesses, in Grenada, have you, based on your work, have you been able to identify any specific risk factors that are most prevalent in our society?
Risk factors for
suicidal ideation.
You see, the thing is, I mainly work in the psychiatric hospital, so I really do not see the patients that you are mainly talking about. So that's more the patients you would be seeing in counseling or in psychotherapy.
Okay.
So I guess that individuals, like the counselors in churches maybe, or in schools, would be more likely to be able to.
So what that
answer.
means.
Having said that, there's one subgroup where suicidal attempts are very, very frequent, and that are individuals who are suffering from something that is called borderline personality disorder. And that can be very severe, so that medical treatment in a hospital is necessary, but most of the individuals are actually, hospitalization is not necessary. And the main group with borderline personalities is females who experienced some kind of physical abuse, in most cases sexual abuse, sometimes in their childhood, or let's say up to 20, maybe age of 20, something like that. And very often they would develop a certain set of symptoms, like frequent suicidal attempts, depression, yes, lots of other symptoms. I wouldn't really focus too much on them. But this is a big group in Grenada. So I also see patients in the practice, and they are quite frequent in. I don't know, what is your experience in psychotherapy?
Right. So I basically asked you a question that I should answer.
Yes. Exactly. That's a good, nice trial.
Okay, so in terms of the psychosocial determinants of mental health, grief tends to be quite prevalent when it comes to suicidal ideation. When people have lost a dear friend, a loved one, and grief ought to follow a natural, healthy process, but when grief becomes complicated, we do expect that some of the psychological symptoms to worsen. And so we do encounter a lot of people who are grieving and suicidal. Also, people who have experienced some adverse scenarios or situations in life. Failure is one of them, for example, and this is prevalent among those who are in school. When they experience failure, they fall short on exams or assignments, suicidal ideation does present as well. And there's a reason for that, which I would talk about later on. We do know, in our context, infidelity plays a significant role in this conversation as well, whereas when people feel betrayed in relationships, sometimes they become both homicidal and suicidal because they want to end the life of the person who has hurt them, and not being able to face the consequences of that action, they also resort to ending their own lives as well. And this is just a few, and the list can be somewhat exhaustive. But there are some personality traits that are quite common among those who are extremely suicidal. And I'm saying extremely suicidal simply because people are either mildly suicidal, moderately suicidal, or should that worsen, they become extremely suicidal. I'd like your participation for this. Can someone tell me some personality traits that may be prevalent among persons who are suicidal? And if you were at the last consultation, you are barred from answering this question. Thank you very much. Personality traits that may be linked to suicidality.
Maybe a daredevil lifestyle, like being adventurous.
Hold on, I want you to say that again.
I would call it like somebody with a daredevil attitude to life, like being very adventurous. You feel you could jump off the top of the waterfall when everybody is having a normal party.
Okay.
Where you want to show off or something like that.
Someone with that dare. Someone who's adventurous. Anyone else?
They don't need to be suicidal because their life is risky already.
You was kind of making a point, maybe somebody who was like a perfectionist or something, because he was making a point earlier.
Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. One more? Personality trait? Linked to suicidality. So perfectionism is actually one of them. When people do not have any, in their minds, there is no place for failure or falling short at all, and doesn't matter what they are doing. It has to be correct all the time. There's a greater risk of suicidal ideation should such a one actually encounter failure. And sir, you mentioned being adventurous. Well, fearlessness is linked to suicidality. The truth is, most adventurous people don't want to die. They might end up dying as a result of their risky behavior. But it's not as if they are setting out to die because they don't think they might, right? And then negativity or pessimism. People who cannot see the sunshine even though the sun is shining at 12 noon. everything is dark and gloomy and dreary. And this may be an actual personality trait. We're not talking about mental illness, no. We're just talking about aspects of an individual's personality. Those being present, they increase the likelihood of suicidal ideation and also to the extreme. Worst case scenario, a person is a perfectionist, also fearless, and they have some negativity in the mix as well. That's a deadly cocktail. Why fearlessness? Because it is important to note that it takes extreme courage to actually harm oneself even to the point of death. Because we all want to live. In fact, the life instinct is embedded in us. And this is why the more a person harms themselves, the more they self-harm, chances are the worse it would get. And while they're doing so, they are inadvertently developing the courage that would bring them to the point of finally completing suicide. And this is, of course, the reason why for people who deal with patients, once a person begins self-harming, then they are supervised as much as possible because we understand the risk associated with self-harm, the risk for finally one day actually completing suicide. And the reason why I'm saying completing suicide and not committing suicide, can anyone tell me? Why do I opt to say completing suicide and not committing? So this is a deliberate play on words here. Remember, we commit crimes, don't we? We commit crimes. And if we are going to talk about decriminalizing suicide, then we have to change our language. Right? We commit crimes. Now, should suicide suicide cannot be considered a crime. A suicide is one that is done. And who are you going to charge at that point, right? But should suicide attempts be crimes? What is your view on this? Can I have some feedback? Should suicide attempts be considered indictable offenses?
When you think about the whole thing called suicide, I don't think it should be like commit on yourself. I don't think it should be a crime. Maybe at some point in the development of society, they thought maybe if you punish somebody for that, because if it's a crime, then there is a punishment. And maybe they're looking at a way to prevent. But maybe punishment is not the way. Maybe treatment is the solution for suicidal thoughts or the practice or trying. But maybe in times gone by, the society maybe accepted it as something to be punished for. But I think in itself, it should be a treatment. Just like in drug abuse in some countries, before was taken as a crime. In other places, it was looked at as a sickness and treated, Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm thinking, I think in some instances it shouldn't be punishable by law. But say, for example, relationship, man and woman, the woman cheated, the man killed her, then he attempts suicide. Shouldn't that be punishable?
Well, for starters, he committed a homicide.
Oh, no, attempted, eh? He attempted. He didn't get through.
Right. So that gentleman would actually be charged for homicide. And yes, and his attempted suicide would not be in view as much as the homicide that he committed.
Okay, so, okay.
I'm just thinking, didn't the church reject to bury individuals who killed themselves not so long ago,
Inside
actually?
the church, yeah. Some religion, I think,
Yeah.
they don't do it inside the church.
But that has the thinking around that has changed, because now that even the church says it's a sin as such, but it's committed because of some kind of a abnormal psychological reaction, and the person is not the person herself
At the time.
at the time when it was done, and that basically changes the whole picture. I think that's how they look at it today, not so?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so Doctor, you're 100% correct. Most of the faith-based organizations believe that when you take your own life, life and death is in the hands of God. And Christian society, we don't really believe in suicide, and we know that most pastors preach against this type of behavior. And it is also preached persons who take their life may not even be able to see the kingdom or to be part of the, so it's a grievous sin that is being done. The religious faiths will preach that. My take is with the suicide, at what level? Director spoke about moderate, mild behavior, suicide behavior attempts. At what stage do you see that the patient who may have attempted suicide or have suicidal thoughts, at what stage do you think that they should be hospitalized?
I will answer the question right now, but first of all, I want to comment on something. In terms of punishment, really and truly, if somebody attempts suicide, the environment should be punished because they didn't recognize it. And I think that is really the big point in suicide prevention, and we haven't focused on that as much, because here's the point: if somebody becomes suicidal, that very rarely happens out of the blue. Happens, but not very frequently. So it's a development over days, weeks, months, and this development typically can be recognized by people in the environment, by family, in the working environment, school, name it. And it can be recognized because it typically comes with a behavioral change. And that's where I would like to give the scepter to you. And I'm coming back to that. To your question.
As we on religion and Christian behavior, I know that some pastors may encounter persons who may be demon-possessed, or they may encounter persons who are mentally ill. And we have a program at the Ministry of Mental Health whereby we empower pastors. That is why we were hoping that our pastors would have been here and our priests. Empower them to identify persons who really needs mental help because they have a mental illness, and somebody who needs spiritual deliverance. And some of the cases, we have reports where persons really need mental care help from our institutions, but the pastors may have them praying with them, which we believe in prayer because we are a prayerful country. So they may be praying with them, yes, but directing them to get the correct care from the ministry or from the hospitals and the counselors and the specialists. They have the belief that they in the church can pray and the person is going to get well. And sometimes you hear they pray, you hear they come for days, weeks praying, and at the end, the person may have committed suicide.
Can we maybe agree that in the future, prior that spiritual treatment starts, that the patient is maybe assessed by a psychiatrist to rule out psychiatric diseases? We as psychiatrists are not specialists in demonology. We are, our actions and our knowledge is based on science. And from a scientific point of view, the idea of being possessed by a demon, which we see in our patients, obia demons, we see it, I would say, on a daily basis in our patients. So it's very frequent, this belief, but that is, from a scientific point of view, an explanation of something that cannot be explained by the individuals or by the environment. But really and truly, from a scientific point of view, it's a disorder of thought. And the demons we were dealing with in our hospital, or they were all very easily extinct with medications. So they cannot withstand haloperidol. From a scientific point of view, demons is not something that can be scientifically explained.
The important bit is that those who are interfacing with people, especially pastors and priests and such, it's important for them, and as you know, this is something that we try to do as much as possible. It's important for them to have basic mental health knowledge, because they also need to be aware of a referral pathway so that we can confirm and rule out the existence of actual psychiatric concerns, first and foremost. And of course, if one method does not seem to help as well, then we refer. We do a referral. But you are going to jump in on that?
No, I'm following you. I'm just preparing myself.
Well, you just whatever that is, you're ready to say it. But there was a second part to your.
Yeah, I want to answer to
See, okay, so go ahead.
The second question, that is in terms of degree of suicidality. And I think we touched it already a little bit. In every patient, we are assessing suicidality and self-harm of the patient. So the thoughts of, I don't want to live, or better I'm dead, something like that, is definitely of concern, but it really doesn't raise a red flag. It has to be dealt with, yes, maybe with psychotherapy, with talking, but that is not acute suicidality where immediate medical treatment is necessary. It becomes a little more of concern if the patient starts to prepare for the suicide, like, I don't know, buying a rope, collecting medication, something like that. So basically, if that stadium is reached, it really becomes of concern, and when the stage is reached that the patient tried or is just about to do it, then, of course, typically treatment on a closed ward is necessary. Because nobody should kill him herself, and the only way to almost certainly prevent that is on a closed ward under constant supervision.
Dr. Burkhardt, I think you're kind of drifting into perhaps signs, warning signs. I know that a lot of people in Grenada have heard reports of suicidal intent, and they tell a person that you are just looking for attention, for example, or you're too happy, you have nothing to be sad about, all right? What we want to do as well is to equip the community, because I do not imagine in an ideal setting, I don't imagine that the psychiatric hospital is sitting there only waiting for people who are severely suicidal, but we have communities that are aware enough to identify signs and symptoms of suicidal ideation, signs and symptoms that will be taken seriously and not lightly, because every report of suicidal intent has to be considered serious until proven otherwise. So apart from perhaps buying items that can be used to harm oneself, people may also, in their speech, they may be saying goodbye more often than not, and they may talk as if they know that they're headed somewhere sometime soon. In other words, preparing people for their departure.
But that ties back into behavioral changes.
Behavioral changes,
Yeah.
right.
Now, and mentioning behavioral changes, there's one form of suicidality which is particularly dangerous, and that is when patients or individuals are starting to really rational balancing. What are the pros and what are the cons of continuing to live? And they have, of course, there are the typical behavioral changes of suicidality, but at a certain point when they made the decision, okay, now I'm going to kill myself, their behavior changes again completely, and they seem to be relaxed. They made their decision, and at that point in time, typically they would start to organize their lives. So that's when they go, that everything is in order. So they might write their will, they might pay their debts off, they might give away their jewelry, something like that. So these are also red flags, particularly if this kind of phase, which seems to be, healthy development from how they were before, when they were depressed, and but in reality they made their decision, and then it becomes really dangerous.
Pertaining to the question. What the question before about should the suicide be considered a crime or not? It really, I think, depends on how they do it. Like, some people, to my knowledge, it's very usual for people to be jumping off of high places or whatnot. And I believe in America, a lot of them like to do it on freeways with overpasses also. So like, if they jump and let's say they land on a car and put a family in danger, and then they swerve and hit other people, that is just like endangerment to other people, in my opinion. I don't know if I could be wrong.
So, Dr. Sumitra, how are you doing, sir? I have a question based on your legal mind, because the young man is asking, for example, if a person were to jump off a high place, fall on a car, and that causes death and some form of damage, but that person survives, is such a one going to be charged for a suicidal attempt? Because that's too legal for me. Is such a one going to be charged for a suicidal attempt? What may the legal implications be of that scenario?
Well, I mean, I think you said this earlier too, and I think that's what matters. I don't think anybody should ever be charged for a suicidal attempt. You know, when people attempt suicide, I think it's much more to do with needing help. So I think PS said that you need to get attempted suicide as a crime off your books, really. So I would suggest that really we should be looking at not worrying about people who attempt suicide as, or are they, is that an attempt you charge them for or not? I think, in fact, the law should not have any provisions for penal provisions for people who attempt suicide. It's something that is a very archaic. It's 18th century. There are, in the entire world, there are only about some handful of countries left, about 10 or 12 now, which continue to still criminalize attempted suicide. And the rest of the world has moved on and nobody criminalizes attempted suicide. And, maybe that's what we should be doing in Grenada too.
The person would be charged, but not for attempting suicide, but for damaging the car or something like that. But here's the point, just maybe a little different, just a little different view of it. Suicide is self-harming behavior. So we would then have to think about criminalizing all self-harm behavior. So what is self-harming behavior? Drinking alcohol, driving car recklessly, drug abuse. So where do you draw the line? So I think that makes clear that we cannot really seriously think about criminal consequences for suicide.
But
to attempt.
In any case, before you go, Dr. Keynes, when was the last time you saw in the papers that someone was charged for attempting suicide? When have you seen that? Never. Can anybody point to a news article where so-and-so was charged on on remand, for example, they were given bail? What that means is that even our police are very compassionate and they tend to intervene and bring people to receive help. All right? So what that means is that it's basically very decorative in the law. It's not necessarily serving a purpose.
Yes, I just wanted to go back and what Dr. Bucket had presented before. More or less the classical presentation of someone who's suicidal. So I had a patient years ago that happened, and her friend, she had a conversation with her friend, and she said to the friend what she was going to do. She gave her all information, what she's going to do, where she's going to do it, how she would do it. The friend, I got to know that because the friend later on became my patient, and she explained all of that to me. And yeah, she listened. She did not take her seriously. She came to work the day before, and the following morning she did not show up. Then she remembered what she had said to her. And when she went back, exactly what she described happened. So sometimes there are presentations that are not classical, but what is important is to listen to whoever the person is and take every word seriously. So that lady, that friend became my patient. Why? Because she was not able to cope with what actually happened. She felt guilty, she blamed herself, everything like that. So I think sometimes if someone just mentions these things, you don't just step it aside, try to encourage them, seek help for them, and so. So I just wanted to clarify that because many times we don't get the classical presentation, but we can get someone who's seeking help, who's asking for help, but in their own way. So it's very important to recognize that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Even when we look at behavioral changes, interestingly, someone who is typically very reserved or low-key, if you notice them quite excitable, even to the point of being a bit eccentric. They seem so overjoyed, and it is not characteristic of them. That is a behavioral change. And so when we observe behavioral changes, it is important to pay close attention, try to find out exactly what is going on.
Good afternoon, everyone. If I may add to the, if suicide attempt should be a crime, I look at it depending on which country you are in. Because globally, a lot of countries are moving into the trend of decriminalizing the suicide. And persons who, like for example in Grenada, we're still in the colonial era where suicidal attempt is a crime. However, as Mr. Hector would have rightfully stated, that is not an everyday practice, so I've never seen anybody be charged for attempted suicide. But I say this to say, persons look at it as a healthy mental status. Some persons would, because of the penalties that you may have to pay, they tend not to want to pay for that crime, so they opt from attempting suicide. And some of the risk factors that may lead one to attempt suicide, there are individuals who are overly aggressive. There are individuals who make decisions without thinking, very impulsive. There are persons who are just hopeless and they just don't know what to do. There are persons who are introverts that do not really express themselves to anybody. They believe they can fix and do everything by themselves. So these are some factors, risk factors that can predispose one to becoming suicidal or attempt suicide.
Thank you.
So what is the penalty for suicide in Grenada, if it's still in the law books? Does anybody know? No, I'm just nosy. Do we know that? A fine?
A fine of how much?
Okay. I hope it's not execution.
The reason why we will struggle to even say what the penalty is because it's not enforced.
But could that be something that there could be compulsory treatment? That might be a way, you know, that you may not just be sent back home, but institutionalized till you're treated and understand and you are understood what is happening in that scenario. Maybe compulsory, I'm stressing the word compulsory intervention. Yeah.
Treatment against the will is something that doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
No, it's
just my
because
suggestion.
the treatment would be psychotherapy. Okay, so if somebody is forced to go to psychotherapy, would the person then really open up and talk? So there need to be some kind of a level of suffering and the wish to change something. Then psychotherapy makes sense. But to force somebody into psychotherapy, how would that work?
But could it be counseling? Like, is it the same thing?
Psychotherapy, very similar.
Because
I don't know, would you take somebody who is not willing to come to you?
So I have encountered unwilling people. I've managed to speak to them in a manner that allowed them to feel like they were part of the process. But even so, many people who came unwillingly, it's very difficult, and they never open up, they never participate. So it depends. Some people come unwillingly and they still end up getting help, whereas others come unwillingly and they do not.
So first session might make sense, or to find out if self-motivation can be developed. If that self-motivation can be developed, then of course psychotherapy makes sense. But if there's no self-motivation, then it wouldn't go anywhere. It's a waste of time and doesn't help anybody.
You're giving them a chance to
Yeah.
speak.
Yes.
The chance,
Yes.
yeah, I agree with the chance, definitely.
Yeah.
Chance to express themselves, and some framework could be organized beyond that.
Of course, what is important is once a person comes, the question of why they are suicidal is not as important immediately as how suicidal they are. Because we want to assess for the risk, first of all. The question of why are you this, that's a longer conversation. But first of all, it is important to understand how serious it is.
I have a question for you. Suicidality and substance abuse.
Yeah. Well, was that a question? So there's a relationship simply because people who are under the influence of substances, they tend to lack impulse control. People who are under the influence of substances may also, in some instances, develop psychosis. They may have a psychotic break as a result of the impact of substances. But either way, using substances puts people at risk of danger in so many different ways, including danger to themselves.
For instance, hallucinations that can occur with stimulative drugs.
Yes.
Sometimes even with marijuana can happen. So that's definitely one part. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the other part, of course, is also that patients with substance use are typically not taking care of them, and the substance becomes the center of their lives. And that also can lead to hopelessness, and many of those, we don't have that here in Grenada with overdoses, because the substances that are common here are not really sedative substances. But in other countries with opiates, for instance, there are lots, I don't know the numbers, but there are definitely quite a number of suicidal attempts with overdose because of the hopeless situation the individuals are in. So that's a substance abuse and death, suicide, or dangerous behavior are very close relationship. So I agree, yes.
So I want to shed light on something, because people tend to be, we know that there's a lot of stigma that stops people from seeking help. They don't want to be considered crazy or insane. And while we have made significant strides, because I can say that people are actually seeking psychotherapy now far more than ever before in Grenada, and less inclined to see a psychiatrist, for example. When it comes to suicidal ideation, is the role of the psychiatrist just to medicate? Are there any other roles that psychiatry plays in terms of treating suicidal ideation?
Of course not. It's always, psychotherapy is always part of the treatment in psychiatry. And we are all psychotherapists. And talking to the patients on a regular basis, that's what we do. Even what we don't do is what the psychotherapists you, the licensed psychotherapist like you are doing, like seeing patients on a regular basis every week, every 2 weeks, something like that. But in terms of crisis intervention and maybe some cognitive therapy, yes, of course we are doing that.
Okay.
Having said that, that is not quite right. Dr. Francia, with the child and youth clinic, sees patients on a regular basis and goes with them sometimes over years. So there it happens. But you see, the point is, even if our patients are discharged from the hospital, we are still taking care of them. And you can also, this is also part of psychotherapy, to see the patient in the outpatient clinic once a month, even if it's like only a couple of minutes, because sometimes we have 100+ patients there. And but just to see the patient knows you take care of him, you know how the patient is. Did anything change in your life? Do you take your medication regularly? How do you feel? That already is psychotherapy. So we are, after discharging our patients, we are not just let them go. We are trying to constantly, well, you can say monitor them, or at least know how they are doing. And if they are not coming, then the district nurses are seeing them in their homes, and in particularly, let's say, critical patients. We even have a team of doctors, social workers, who would then visit the patient. We do that once a week in the different districts in Grenada, and once a month in Carriacou, actually. We even do that in Carriacou. So it's a constant form of psychotherapy.
Right.
Yes, good night, everybody. I want to speak about something that, as a psychiatrist, psychologist, or maybe counselor, everybody who is in contact with people or patients that have experienced suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, suicidal idea, any kind of suicidal behavior, in my experience, I always say that we must be focused in what was the factor who triggered that. We cannot be focused on the tip of the iceberg, because if we going only to put treatment or maybe to give into them psychotherapy for what we are seeing at that time, we will not get in through and the patient will not improve. Mm-hmm. We need to try to find the risk factor, those factors that may be caused or they are associated with that kind of suicidal behavior. We need to try to go to the base of the problem, and then we will get the solution. In my experience working with children and teenagers, always I try to involve family, to involve school, and to involve everybody that could be associated with the patient and could helping them in the future also. Right. Because without that, we will not get the successful that we are looking for. Maybe the patient could experience suicidal tendency because of school problem, because of family issues, or because they are experiencing symptoms that maybe in the future will be associated with one mental illness. In our clinic, for example, the majority of children that they are experiencing suicidal idea or any kind of suicidal behavior, some research that we are doing or we are in progress, what we found that only maybe 50% of them have not any mental condition. But there are one group of them that they have. Because when we talk about depression, sadness, and we start to ask and deepen the situation, how long that child has been suffering for that? Mm-hmm. And when do you get that information? More than 1 year, more than 3 years experience sadness, lack of energy, lack of motivation. That is one disorder. That mm-hmm. is not one simple symptoms. Mm-hmm. That's why you see patients going to see the counselor for 1 year, 2 years, experience sadness. No. You could treat that person with counseling or maybe psychotherapy for 6 months. But when the patient experiences sadness, lack of energy, lack of motivation, or maybe lack of appetite or different symptoms for more than 1 year, that is one disorder.
Absolutely.
That is something that we must keep in place at any time that we are in contact with the patient. How long the patient is suffering with that symptoms. If there are other symptoms associated with that one that we are seeing at that time, that is something important that all the counseling psychology must take in place at the time that they are treating one patient. And the other thing is that we must work with the risk factors. If we don't work with the risk factor, we will not get in through with the solution of the problem. Suicidal behavior have a lot of factors associated with that kind of situation. Personal factor, family factor, community factors. All of that factor, they are in connection with that suicidal behavior that maybe one child or one adult could experience. You have pressure at workplace, you have pressure at home, you have personality trait that could be associated with that kind of thing. We can say, for example, that people, they are impulsive or they are negative thought or they are aggressive, so they will commit suicide. No, everybody could do it. Depend on what scenario you are at that time.
Thanks, Dr. Francia. I believe you are pointing to the fact that there are a few factors that often coincide simultaneously, leading to suicidal ideation. And so it is important to explore and find out. Of course, first of all, we want to make sure that a person is safe, right? Because if they're not safe, then if they remain at risk while we are exploring, then we can still lose them. But I want to shift gears a little bit because the average citizen, for example, does not want to be referred to as a patient. And I know that the psychiatrists deal with patients all the time. But there are people who, if we were to talk to the average person and give them tips on how to look out for suicidal ideation, we're talking about duration, for example. How long has your son or daughter been isolating themselves in the bedroom? Do you say, well, it's just because they're addicted to the gadget, so it doesn't matter? For example, how long has your son or daughter or brother or sister been sad? And do you continue to tell them, hey, you have nothing to be sad about, you have food, you have clothes, you have a house? And the worst is referring to children in Africa who are hungry. I hope we stop saying that in 2025 and beyond, right? Because even if a person has all the amenities, it is still possible for them to experience profound sadness. And this is something that we need to take seriously. When we see this persisting for an extended, these symptoms existing for an extended time, I want to put you on the spot, Dr. Keynes Douglas. What should the family members do when they see these symptoms persisting for an extended time?
So I think the key word here is extended time. Because a child could be, cranky, it can be not having a good day. But if it's for an extended period of time, I would say like 4 weeks and beyond, it's something that we should take seriously and help should be sought as soon as possible. Because the longer the person remains without help, the more complicated the situation would become.
Thank you.
You mentioned gadgets. I think these days we are really facing a new risk factor for suicidality, and that is lack of learning social abilities to interact due to spending too much time with screens, TikTok, YouTube, whatnot. And looking at that, we have the male and the female. The females seem to be more active in social media, and there are lots of incidences where females became suicidal because of bullying, because of even talking about suicide, talking each other into suicide. In terms of, well, females would still be more interactive, so it's more, they're maybe a little better in terms of social interactions than boys would be. Like in the teens nowadays, I almost don't know any boy, 16, 17, who doesn't spend lots of hours playing games and on the screens. So they are really starting to lack social interaction. And that is really an issue because boys, male, in general have more problems to talk about their problems to anybody else. And we haven't really touched on that. Question. Do you think if you compare males to females, are there more male or more female who commit suicide? Complete suicide. What do you think? Okay, let's do it differently. Who thinks females are more? Raise your hand. Who thinks male are more? Okay, 90% cowards. Okay, interesting. Okay, let's do it again. Females. Who thinks females? 5, 6, 7. Okay, who thinks male? Okay, actually the males have it. It's about 4 times more males who kill themselves than females do. If I compare what I see in the hospital, there are more females with suicidal attempts than male, much more. Hardly ever see a male there. And that is because male typically are successful with their suicidal completion. They choose the ways that are more likely to be successful. So it's a lot more male. And if you look at, and the question raises why male? Think about it. Male have a certain expectation in the society to be the strong ones, to be the healthy ones, to be the successful ones. And lots of males are not able to fulfill that. And then the second part comes because of the role of the expected role in the society, they are less likely to talk about their problems. Okay, so that leads to social isolation, lack of the ability for social interaction and so on, and then they just make the decision. And I could tell you what they do, but I won't. But they're typically more successful. It's male, actually. So where did I start? Was that the point? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Oh yeah, no, with the interaction. So we are, and the other with the social media. The other thing is AI. So I know for a fact that in the United States, AI companies are sued by parents of children who had a conversation with one of those artificial individuals there, and the artificial individual actually talked them into suicide. Happens not only with artificial intelligence, also happens with YouTube, TikTok, all these kind of stuff. So it's a big new problem that we are actually facing for when we talk about prevention of, and I don't know what to do, because, well, I know for a fact because we have grandchildren living with us, and taking away the ability to interact socially, meaning take the phone away, can easily cause suicidality as well. It's true. So it's a big problem. I don't have a solution for that.
So I think it's a good time to just segue into the question section because we are not here for the entire night.
If we put this little statistic, this little poll we did between the male and the female in a Caribbean context, would we say it goes across the board for young Caribbean males as well as the more elderly Caribbean male, or is there a distinction in age group as to higher prevalence with the older males as compared to the younger males in a Caribbean context? Because, you know, we have a Caribbean feel about our macho thing and, you know, who's the boss and so, but can we distinguish between if it's the same for the young as well as the more elderly males in the Caribbean context?
I'm sure that there are statistics, but I don't know the numbers. Do you know the numbers?
I don't have those stats as well, but what we do know is that females are more likely to self-harm. So you may see a female with marks on their skin. You seldom see men doing this because men tend to go for the more lethal methods, instant. They're not going to go through the gradual suffering. Men tend to have a lot more pent up inside than women who are more expressive.
In some of the African countries, definitely male complete suicide far more often than females.
Questions or comments? The floor is open. Let me just do a real life poll here. How many of us believe that suicide attempts should be removed from the criminal code? Can I see the show of your hands? All right, so I guess I don't need to ask the alternative because most of us actually believe. Yeah, we don't have time for the arguments. We don't have time for your reasons, but we hope to get your reasons in another setting. Any more questions or comments? If not, we do thank you all for joining us here this evening. Thank you for those who also sat through this engagement online. At the center of the work that we are doing is this drive to prevent as many suicides as possible. This is not solely the work of the Ministry of Mental Health, Wellness and Religious Affairs, but our campaign is to ensure that as a nation, the nation of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, we all consider this our business, to be our brothers and sisters' keeper, and to get involved, to pay attention to the signs and symptoms, and prevent as many suicides as possible. I repeat again that our goal in the coming year, 2026, is to, by January 1st, 2027, to say that we did not have a single suicide for the entire year, and to follow suit in the year 2027. That is our interest, because death by suicide has a unique sting that people struggle to grapple with. So as a nation, let us work on jointly preventing suicides, and I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much to our head table. Let's hear it for them one more time. And thank you very much to you, our audience, who are very interactive. Now, to bring this evening's proceeding to a close, we'd like to ask Jane Chateau to do the vote of thanks.
Pleasant good night to everyone. Now, they're saying everything, give thanks, right? So tonight, I would like to, on behalf of the Ministry of Mental Health, Wellness and Religious Affairs, I would like to thank Dr. Burkhardt, Dr. Josh Hector, our wonderful, hard-working PS, and to everyone that came out, and have been supporting this ministry on this drive. Mental health does not discriminate, so we're trying our very best to reach as much persons as we possibly can. And I want to thank everybody for coming out and support and spread the word. Every life that is saved is, one in a million, So thanks everyone for coming out again and continue supporting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jane, for saying thanks. Guys, before you leave, we have some refreshments at the back, and we also have a few tokens there that will be given to you. So don't run out just yet. Please partake in our refreshments, and we have some tokens for you. So once again, thank you.